What are you guys doing here? Bryce Fletcher stood in the parking lot, fists clenched, facing 5 men twice her size. Homeless, 19. Not a soul who'd notice if she vanished tonight. Your business, Black Street rat. Craig Dutton shoved her back. Behind her, Walt Caldwell groaned on the asphalt. Help. Look who he's begging for help. Craig laughed. He's begging that stinking little rat. Please, I can't breathe. Walt's voice cracked. Bryce didn't run. She stepped forward. Touch him again. I dare you. Craig grabbed her collar. Who do you think you are, black rat? Get back to your stinking garbage dump. Come here. She swung first. 5 against 1. A homeless black girl protecting a stranger in a parking lot. What happened next brought 1,000 motorcycles to her door. 12 hours earlier, the sun hadn't even cleared the tree line when Bryce Fletcher crawled out from under the Cedar Falls overpass. She stuffed her sleeping bag into a torn garbage sack and shoved it behind the concrete pillar where no one would look. 3 years of hiding had taught her to leave no trace. She walked 2 miles to the gas station on Route 9. Not for gas, for the dumpster behind it. The morning shift tossed out expired sandwiches around 6. If she got there first, she ate. If the other drifters beat her to it, she didn't. Today, she was second. A man twice her age had already torn open the bag. He saw her coming and clutched the food to his chest. Back off, girl. Bryce didn't argue. She circled to the side dumpster, the one nobody checked because it mostly held cardboard. She'd learned months ago that sometimes a bruised apple or a crushed granola bar slipped through. Today she found half a protein bar and a bottle of water with the cap still sealed. A good morning. That was life on the streets. You measured your days in what you found before someone else found it first. She'd been out here since she was 16. 7 foster homes before that, each one worse than the last. The first family forgot her name within a week. The second locked the fridge at night. The third had a son who liked to throw things. By the 4th, she'd stopped unpacking her bag. The last home, the Turners, was the one that broke something inside her. Gerald Turner didn't just yell. He used his hands. When Bryce told her caseworker, the woman sighed and said she'd look into it. 2 months passed. Nothing changed. So Bryce climbed out the bathroom window one January night with $40 and a backpack. She was 16. Nobody came looking. The system released her officially at 18. A letter arrived at an address she no longer lived at, informing her that her case was closed. That was it. No phone call, no follow-up. Just a piece of paper mailed to a house she'd fled 2 years before. 3 years on the street taught her things no classroom ever would. How to sleep with one eye open, how to spot a threat from 30 feet away, how to throw a punch that landed before the other person finished raising their fist. The drifters under the overpass learned quickly. The skinny black girl hit fast and hit first. She wasn't strong, but she was quick, and she never hesitated. That combination kept her alive when bigger bodies came for her food or her spot or worse. By noon, she'd walked into town. Cedar Falls was small. 1 main street, 2 churches, a hardware store, and Donna's Diner. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and strangers were noticed immediately. Bryce slipped into the gas and go on the corner. She set 2 quarters and 3 dimes on the counter. Cheapest water you got. The cashier, a teenage boy with acne and a name tag that read Kyle, stared at her like she'd dragged something dead into the store. That's not enough. It was enough last week. Price went up. He didn't look sorry. She picked up her coins and walked out. No argument, no scene. She'd learned that too. Making noise got you remembered, and getting remembered got you run out of town. Outside, a motorcycle sat alone in the lot. A big one. Chrome pipes, leather saddlebags, a custom paint job that probably cost more than every dollar Bryce had ever held combined. Its owner stood beside it. An old man with silver hair pulled into a low ponytail, a thick gray beard, and a leather vest covered in patches. Bryce didn't know what the patches meant. She didn't know that the largest one, stitched across the back in gold thread, read, "Iron Wolves, President Emeritus." She didn't know that the man checking his tire pressure had once commanded the loyalty of over 1,000 riders across 3 states. She sat on the curb 15 feet away, chewing the protein bar slowly to make it last. The old man glanced at her once, nodded, and went back to his bike. Neither of them spoke. In 8 hours, she would save his life. In 8 hours, everything would change. But right now, they were just 2 strangers in a parking lot, one with everything, one with nothing. Sharing the same patch of afternoon sun, night fell on Cedar Falls like a curtain being pulled. No streetlights behind the gas and go, just the hum of a busted cooler and the flicker of the store's neon sign, bleeding red across the pavement. Bryce found her spot, the narrow gap between the dumpster and the back wall. She'd slept there twice before. The concrete held the day's warmth for about an hour after sundown. After that, you just shivered and waited for morning. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her back against the wall. The protein bar was long gone. Her stomach growled, but hunger was background noise now. It had been for years. Sleep never came easy. It came in fragments, 15 minutes here, 20 there. Broken by every sound. A car door, a dog bark, footsteps. She'd trained herself to wake at footsteps. In the foster homes, footsteps at night meant trouble. On the street, they meant worse. Tonight, her mind drifted back to the Turner house. She didn't want it to. It went anyway. Gerald Turner had a routine. He'd drink until 9. By 9:30, his voice would change, lower, thicker, like something animal had crawled into his throat. By 10, he'd find a reason. A dish left in the sink, a light left on, a look he didn't like. The first time he hit her, she was 14, an open hand across the mouth. He told her she'd earned it. She believed him. Kids believe the adults who feed them, even the ones who hurt them. That's how the system works. You're grateful for a roof, even when the roof comes with fists. The second time, she fought back. She bit his wrist so hard she tasted metal. He threw her into the hallway wall. The drywall cracked. Margaret Turner stood in the kitchen doorway, watching, holding a coffee mug with both hands. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just sipped and turned around. Bryce told her caseworker, Linda, the next Thursday. Linda wrote something on a form and said, "We'll look into it." Bryce waited. 2 months. Nothing changed. Gerald kept drinking. Margaret kept sipping. The walls kept cracking. One night, he came to her room. Not angry this time. Something worse. Something quiet. Bryce grabbed her backpack and climbed out the bathroom window. January. 4 degrees. $40 in her pocket. She walked 6 miles to the bus station and bought a ticket to wherever the cheapest fare would take her. Cedar Falls. She'd never heard of it. That was the point. For the first year, she lived behind a church. The pastor let her sleep in the shed until the deacons voted to change the lock. For the second year, she moved from overpass to overpass, town to town, always circling back to Cedar Falls because at least she knew which dumpsters were worth checking. The street sharpened her. Not just her fists, her instincts. She could read a man's intentions from how he walked. She knew the difference between someone who wanted to talk and someone who wanted to take. She learned to strike first, strike fast, and disappear before anyone called the cops. She never started fights, but she finished them. The scar on her left forearm, a razor from a drifter named Sully who wanted her sleeping bag, proved it. She'd broken his nose and kept the bag. The cut healed in 2 weeks. The lesson lasted forever. Nobody protects you but you. Now she sat behind a gas station, listening to the night. Headlights swept across the lot. A pickup truck, loud engine, rap music thumping from the speakers. It parked sideways across 2 spots. 5 doors opened. 5 young men spilled out. Loud, drunk, looking for something to break. Bryce pressed deeper into the shadow. None of her business. She'd survived this long by not being seen. Then she heard the motorcycle. The old man from the afternoon, the one with the silver ponytail and the leather vest, pulled in and parked near the entrance. He took off his helmet, stretched his back, and walked toward the store. Craig Dutton blocked his path. "Nice ride, old man. That yours?" Walt tried to step around him. Craig grabbed his arm, and the first punch landed before Walt could finish saying, "Let go." Bryce watched from the dark. Her hands shook, not from cold. Every bone in her body screamed, "Run." But her legs carried her forward. She came out of the dark like something feral. No warning, no hesitation. The first kick caught the nearest man behind the knee. His leg buckled and he hit the pavement face first. Before he could roll over, Bryce had already moved. The second one swung at her. She ducked under his fist and drove her knuckle into his floating rib. He doubled over, gasping. Street fighting had no rules. You hit what was open, and you hit it before they knew you were there. The third one grabbed her hair. She snapped her head back, a clean headbutt to his chin. He staggered. She twisted free, leaving a fistful of braids in his grip. 3 down in under 10 seconds. The parking lot went quiet. Craig stared at her. His fourth man stared at her. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was a girl. She was skinny. She was nobody. "Hold her," Craig said. They rushed her together. The fourth man pinned her arms. Craig hit her in the stomach. Once. Twice. She buckled but didn't scream. He kicked her in the ribs. She dropped to one knee. "Stupid little rat." Craig grabbed her jaw. "You should have stayed in your hole." Bryce spit blood in his face. He reared back to hit her again. And then sirens. Faint, but growing. Someone in the store had called the cops. "Let's go." Craig shoved Bryce to the ground, and the 5 of them scrambled into the pickup. Tires screamed. Tail lights vanished down Route 9. The lot went still. Walt lay on his side, breathing hard. Blood ran from his nose into his beard. He pushed himself up on one elbow and looked at the girl crumpled on the asphalt 10 feet away. She was already trying to stand, one arm wrapped around her ribs. Her lip was split. Her left eye was swelling shut. "Kid." Walt's voice was raw. "Why did you do that?" Bryce wiped blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked at him, this old white man she didn't know, on the ground of a parking lot in a town that didn't want her. "Because nobody ever showed up for me." She said it like a fact. No self-pity, no emotion, just the way things were. Walt stared at her for a long time. Then he got to his feet, slowly, holding his ribs the same way she held hers. "What's your name?" "Bryce." "Where do you live, Bryce?" She looked away. That was answer enough. "Come home with me. My wife will patch us both up." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding from your face." "I've had worse." Walt walked to his motorcycle and opened the saddlebag. He pulled out a clean bandana and held it out to her. She didn't take it. "I'm not asking for charity," she said, "and I'm not offering any. He set the bandana on the ground between them. "You saved my life. Least I can do is feed you a meal. One meal. Then you go wherever you want." She looked at the bandana, then at him, then at the road leading back to the overpass, to the dumpster, to another night of shivering alone. She picked it up. 20 minutes later, Bryce Fletcher sat at a kitchen table for the first time in 3 years. Helen Caldwell, small, white-haired, eyes like warm tea, cleaned her cuts without asking a single question. She just hummed softly and worked. Bryce didn't cry, but her hands trembled the entire time. Bryce woke before dawn. Habit. On the street, you never slept past first light. She sat up on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Clean ceiling. No cracks, no water stains, no Gerald Turner's footsteps overhead. For 3 full seconds, she forgot where she was. Then the smell of bacon hit her, and she remembered. Helen stood at the stove in a blue cotton robe, flipping strips in a cast-iron skillet. She looked over her shoulder and smiled like this was normal. Like a homeless girl bleeding on her couch was just another Tuesday. "Morning. How do you take your eggs?" Bryce didn't answer right away. She was staring at the kitchen table. It was set for 3. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 glasses of orange juice. She hadn't sat at a table set for her since she was 11. "Scrambled," she said. Her voice was hoarse. Walt came down the hall in jeans and a flannel shirt, moving slow. His ribs were taped under the fabric. He poured himself coffee and sat across from Bryce without ceremony. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah." She hadn't. Every creak in the house had woken her. But she wasn't going to say that. They ate in silence. Not awkward silence. The kind that comes when people don't need to perform for each other. Bryce ate everything on her plate and then stopped herself from asking for more. Old habit. In foster homes, asking for seconds got you noticed. Getting noticed got you hurt. Helen put another scoop of eggs on her plate without being asked. Bryce looked at her. Helen just smiled and turned back to the stove. After breakfast, Walt led her to the garage. It was massive, a 2-bay workshop with tool walls, a hydraulic lift, and 3 motorcycles in various stages of repair. The air smelled like engine oil and metal shavings. It smelled like purpose. "You know anything about bikes?" Walt asked. "No." "Good. Means you won't have any bad habits." He handed her a wrench. "Hold this. I'll show you the rest." For the next 2 hours, Bryce learned the anatomy of a Harley-Davidson Softail. Carburetor, clutch cable, primary chain. Walt explained each piece once, and she remembered. He didn't have to repeat himself. "You're quick," he said. "I've always been quick." She meant more than mechanics, and he knew it. Walt watched her work. The way she moved, precise, efficient, no wasted motion. The same instincts that had kept her alive on the street made her a natural in the shop. She anticipated which tool he needed before he asked. She spotted the oil leak before he pointed it out. Around noon, Walt wiped his hands on a rag and sat on the bench. He looked at her for a long time. "Bryce, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." She tensed. That sentence never led anywhere good. "Where's your family?" "Don't have one." "Foster care?" "Aged out." "When?" "1.5 years ago." "And before that?" She put down the wrench. 7 homes. None of them worked out. Walt nodded slowly. He didn't push. He didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "that must have been hard," or any of the useless things people said when they wanted to sound kind without actually doing anything. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. He walked to the far side of the garage, spoke quietly for about 5 minutes, and came back. "Who was that?" Bryce asked. "A friend." That was all he said. In the afternoon, Walt suggested they go into town for lunch. Bryce hesitated. I don't have money for... Did I ask you for money? They rode into town on Walt's truck. Main Street Cedar Falls looked the same as always, quiet, clean, and suspicious of anything unfamiliar. Walt parked in front of Donna's Diner, the only sit-down restaurant within 15 miles. The bell above the door jingled when they walked in. A dozen heads turned. Bryce felt every pair of eyes land on her and stay there. She was used to it, the scanning, the tightening of shoulders, the way people pulled their bags a little closer. Donna Prescott stood behind the register. Mid-50s, bleached hair stiff with spray, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She owned the diner, sat on the town council, and ran the annual 4th of July parade. In Cedar Falls, Donna's approval was currency. She looked at Bryce the way you look at something stuck to your shoe. Walt. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Who's your friend? This is Bryce. She's staying with us. Donna's smile thinned. Staying with you? How nice. She picked up 2 menus, then paused. Actually, Walt, can I talk to you a moment? Privately? They stepped to the side. Bryce could hear every word. Walt, honey, I don't know what you're doing, but you can't just bring people like that in here. My customers, people like what, Donna? You know what I mean. She looks like trouble. She'll scare off my regulars. She saved my life last night. Donna blinked. I'm sure she did. But this is my establishment, and I have a right to. Seat us or don't, Donna. But choose your next words carefully. Donna seated them. At the table nearest the kitchen, the one next to the bathroom door that nobody ever requested, she dropped the menus and walked away without taking their drink order. Bryce stared at the laminated menu. She wasn't reading it. She was calculating. How long before this town pushed her out the way every other place had? Don't let her get to you, Walt said. She didn't. Liar. He said it gently. But that's okay. You don't have to pretend with me. 30 minutes later, they left without ordering. Not because of Donna, because Officer Tate showed up. Young, blonde, badge too shiny. Donna had called him. Sir, we've had a complaint about he glanced at Bryce, a disturbance. She's sitting in a booth, Ryan. That's not a disturbance. I understand, sir, but are you charging her with something? Officer Tate shifted on his feet. No, sir. Then we're done here. Walt put his hand on Bryce's shoulder, the first time he'd touched her, and guided her out the door. She didn't flinch. She wanted to, but she didn't. In the truck, Walt gripped the steering wheel and stared through the windshield. This town's about to learn a lesson. Bryce didn't ask what he meant, but something in his voice made her believe him. 2 weeks passed. 14 mornings of waking up in a bed instead of on concrete. 14 breakfasts she didn't have to fight for. Bryce fell into a rhythm at the Caldwell house. Mornings in the garage with Walt, rebuilding engines, replacing brake pads, learning the difference between a good weld and one that would kill you at 70 miles an hour. Afternoons in the kitchen with Helen, chopping onions, seasoning cast iron, pulling biscuits from the oven at exactly the right second. You've got good hands, Helen told her one evening, watching Bryce knead bread dough. Steady. They've had practice, Bryce said. She didn't explain what kind. Walt started teaching her to ride. She took to it the way she took to everything, fast, instinctive, no fear. By the 3rd day, she could handle the soft ale on the back roads without wobbling. By the 5th, she was leaning into curves like she'd been born on 2 wheels. Natural, Walt muttered, shaking his head. Absolute natural. A few Iron Wolves members stopped by during those weeks. big men with thick beards and road-worn leather. They came to check on Walt after hearing about the parking lot. One by one, they met Bryce. One by one, they heard the story. None of them looked at her the way Donna had. They shook her hand. They called her Little Sister. A man named Hank Morrison, tall, quiet, tattooed forearms, told her, "Anyone who bleeds for one of us is one of us." Bryce smiled at that. A real smile. Helen saw it from the kitchen window and had to turn away so no one would see her cry. But the nights were still hard. Bryce woke at 2, at 3, at 4, bolt upright, soaked in sweat, reaching for a door that wasn't there. In the dream, she was always back at the Turners. The hallway, the footsteps, the locked bathroom window that wouldn't open. One night, Helen found her sitting on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Helen sat beside her. No questions, no advice, just presence. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Doors don't lock from the outside here." Bryce leaned into her, just barely, just enough. She knew this feeling wouldn't last. Good things never did. Not for her. It started with a petition. Donna Prescott printed 50 copies and left them on the counter at the diner, at the post office, at the church bulletin board, and at the front desk of the town hall. The heading read, "Concerned Citizens of Cedar Falls, Protecting Our Community." The text beneath was careful. Lawyered. It never mentioned Bryce's name directly. It referred to an unvetted transient of unknown background currently residing with an elderly couple on Maple Drive. It cited safety concerns. It cited property values. It cited the town's family-oriented character. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew exactly who it was about. Within 4 days, Donna had 31 signatures. The mayor's wife signed. The school principal signed. Kyle from the Gas and Go signed. People who had never spoken to Bryce, never looked her in the eye, signed a piece of paper asking for her removal. Some signed because they believed it. Most signed because Donna asked, and in Cedar Falls, nobody said no to Donna. Walt found out when he went to buy nails at the hardware store. The owner, Pete Rollins, had the decency to look embarrassed. "I didn't sign it, Walt, but I thought you should know." Walt read it twice. His jaw tightened until the muscle in his cheek twitched. "Who's behind this? Who do you think?" What Walt didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Donna had a second card to play. Craig Dutton was her nephew, her sister's boy. The family resemblance was there if you looked. The same narrow eyes, the same thin-lipped smile that never meant anything good. Craig had been whispering in her ear since the night of the parking lot, spinning the story the way he needed it spun. Craig walked into the Cedar Falls police station on a Wednesday morning. He brought 2 of his friends, Tyler Voss and Derek Earl. All 3 of them sat in front of Officer Tate and filed sworn statements. Their story was simple. They were hanging out in the parking lot when a homeless girl attacked them unprovoked. They defended themselves. The old man got caught in the middle. The girl was dangerous, violent, and needed to be locked up before she hurt someone else. 3 matching statements. 3 signatures. Officer Tate typed up the report without asking a single follow-up question. He didn't interview Walt. He didn't check for other witnesses. He didn't pull the security footage. He just filed it and sent it up the chain. The arrest warrant came Thursday afternoon. Walt was in the garage when the cruiser pulled into the driveway. Bryce was beside him, handing him a socket wrench. She saw the lights before he did. Red and blue, cutting across the garage wall like a warning she'd seen too many times. 2 officers, Tate and his partner, a woman named Reynolds, who kept her hand on her holster the entire time. Bryce Fletcher? She set down the wrench. Yeah. You're under arrest for aggravated assault. You have the right to remain silent. Walt stepped forward. This is insane. She was defending me. I was the one who got attacked. Sir, step back. I'm the victim. I'll testify. Sir, step back. They cuffed her in the driveway, hands behind her back. The metal was cold against her wrists. She'd felt handcuffs before, once when she was 15, picked up for trespassing in an abandoned building where she'd been sleeping. The system had a way of putting its hands on you and calling it procedure. It's fine, Walt. Her voice was steady. I've been in worse. But her eyes were red, and her hands, behind her back, were shaking. Helen came running out of the house. She stopped on the porch, one hand over her mouth. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there watching the cruiser pull away with the girl who had started to feel like a daughter. And something in her face collapsed inward like a house with its foundation pulled out. At the station, Bryce sat in an interrogation room for 4 hours. No lawyer, no phone call, just a metal table, a plastic chair, and a camera with a blinking red light. Officer Tate came in once. Want to tell me your side? I was defending an old man from 5 guys who were beating him to death. That's not what the witnesses say. Your witnesses are the ones who attacked him, Tate shrugged. 3 sworn statements against your word. And the security camera at the Gas and Go was malfunctioning that night. No footage. Bryce stared at him. Convenient. Just the facts, ma'am. She knew what was happening. She'd seen it before. Not in courtrooms, but in foster homes, in schools, in every place where the person with less power told the truth and the person with more power told the story. The story always won. By Friday morning, the news had spread beyond Cedar Falls. The county paper ran a headline: Homeless woman arrested for brutal attack on local residents. It didn't mention that the local residents had beaten a 63-year-old man in a parking lot. It didn't mention that Bryce weighed 93 pounds. It didn't mention Donna Prescott, the petition, or the fact that Craig Dutton had a prior arrest for drunk and disorderly that mysteriously vanished from public record. Social media did what social media does. The comments came fast and ugly. Lock her up and throw away the key. This is what happens when you let these people roam free. Cedar Falls used to be safe before outsiders started showing up. Shouldn't have let her into town in the first place. Nobody asked for Bryce's side. Nobody called Walt. Nobody questioned why a 19-year-old girl with no record, no home, and no one in her corner was sitting in a cell while 5 grown men walked free. Walt called every lawyer in the county, 4 of them. 2 didn't return his call. 1 said he was booked solid through the month. The 4th, a young woman fresh out of law school named Sarah Whitfield, said she'd take the case. She called back an hour later and said she couldn't. Her office lease was held by Donna Prescott's cousin. Taking the case meant losing her practice before it started. That's how small towns work. The web is invisible until you pull one thread, and then you see it. Every strand connected, every exit sealed, every door locked from the outside. Walt sat at his kitchen table that night. Helen had gone to bed, but he could hear her crying through the wall. He stared at his phone, at a number he hadn't called in 5 years. The last time he'd dialed it, he'd been stepping down as president of the Iron Wolves. He'd told Reed Garrison, his successor, that he was done, retired, out of the game. He'd meant it then. He didn't mean it now. He pressed call. Reed Garrison picked up on the second ring. Walt. His voice was deep, unhurried, the kind of voice that filled a room without trying. It's been a while. I need help, Reed. Tell me. Walt told him everything. The parking lot, the girl, The fight, the arrest, the petition, the lawyer who couldn't take the case because Donna Prescott's family owned half the town. He told it straight, no embellishment, the way a man talks when he's out of options. Reed listened without interrupting. When Walt finished, the line was quiet for 5 seconds. Then Reed said one thing. "If you say she's family, she's family. Give me 48 hours." He hung up. Reed Garrison had been president of the Iron Wolves for 5 years. Before that, he'd been Walt's vice president for a decade. He ran a construction company out of Des Moines, employed 60 people, and managed a network of 12 Iron Wolves chapters across Iowa, Nebraska, and Missouri. When Reed made a phone call, people answered. When Reed asked for something, it happened. Within 6 hours, every chapter president in the network had received a message. Not a text, a phone call. Reed believed in voices, not screens. He told each one the same thing. One of ours was attacked. The girl who saved him is in a cell. We ride Saturday. The response was immediate and unanimous. No debates, no votes. A brother called, and the pack answered. But Reed wasn't just building an army. He was building a case. He called Hank Morrison, the same quiet man with tattooed forearms who'd shaken Bryce's hand 2 weeks earlier. Hank had spent 14 years as an IT systems engineer before joining the Iron Wolves. He'd set up security networks for banks, hospitals, and government buildings. Finding a deleted camera feed from a gas station was, in his words, a Tuesday afternoon. Hank drove to Cedar Falls on Thursday night. He didn't go to the Gas and Go. He didn't need to. Every commercial security camera sold after 2018 backed up its footage to a cloud server maintained by the manufacturer. The store owner could delete the local copy. Officer Tate could write "malfunctioning" in his report. But the cloud didn't care about small-town politics. Hank sat in his truck outside a coffee shop, opened his laptop, and went to work. The camera system at the Gas and Go was a Sentinel Pro 4000, standard for small retail. He contacted the manufacturer's support line, identified himself as a licensed security consultant, which he was, and requested the cloud backup for the date in question under a data preservation hold. By Friday morning, he had it. The footage was clean, time-stamped, unedited. It showed everything. Craig Dutton and 4 men pulling into the lot. Walt walking toward the store. Craig blocking his path. Craig throwing the first punch, Walt on the ground. 5 men kicking him. Bryce running in from the shadows. The fight, the sirens. The 5 men fleeing. Self-defense. Clear as glass. But Hank found something else. Something better. At the 11:47 mark, 23 minutes after the 5 men fled, a call was placed from Craig Dutton's cell phone. The cloud system logged it because the camera's audio feed was still recording. Craig had stopped his truck 200 yards down the road and made the call on speaker with his windows down. "Aunt Donna, we got a problem." The rest of the conversation was muffled but audible. Enough to establish that Craig called Donna immediately after the attack. Enough to prove she knew the truth before she started the petition. Enough to show that her campaign against Bryce wasn't civic concern. It was a cover-up. Hank sent the files to Reed. Reed sent them to Walt. Walt drove to the county sheriff's office, not the Cedar Falls station, not Officer Tate, and sat down across from Sheriff Ed Barnes. Barnes was old school, 30 years in law enforcement. He didn't owe Donna Prescott anything, and he didn't like being made to look like a fool. He watched the footage twice. He listened to the phone call 3 times. Then he picked up his desk phone and made 2 calls. The first released Bryce Fletcher from custody, effective immediately. All charges dropped. The second opened a criminal investigation into Craig Dutton, Tyler Voss, Derek Earle, and Donna Prescott. Walt stood in the sheriff's lobby when Bryce walked out. She looked smaller than he remembered. Thinner. 2 days in a cell with bad food and no sleep had hollowed her out. "Let's go home," he said. She nodded. Then quietly, "You came back for me." "Kid, I was never leaving." Saturday morning broke clear and cold over Cedar Falls. By 7, the first rumble echoed off the hills east of town. By 8, Main Street was vibrating. They came from Des Moines, from Omaha, from Kansas City, Lincoln, and St. Joseph. They came in packs of 20, 50, 100, rolling down Route 9 in staggered formations, exhaust pipes growling, chrome catching the early light. Harleys, Indians, custom choppers with ape hangers and straight pipes that rattled the windows of every shop on Main Street. The people of Cedar Falls heard them before they saw them. A woman walking her dog stopped on the sidewalk and stared. The owner of the hardware store stepped outside and forgot to close the door. A group of teenagers pulled out their phones and started filming. By 9 o'clock, 1,000 motorcycles lined Main Street from the Baptist Church to the water tower. 1,000 riders stood beside their machines, men and women in leather vests, patches on their backs, arms crossed, faces calm. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They just stood there, filling every inch of available space, and waited. Reed Garrison had set up a flatbed truck at the center of town, directly across from Donna's diner. On the flatbed sat a projector, 2 speakers, and a screen large enough to be seen from 3 blocks away. A local news van from Channel 7 had parked at the corner. A reporter from the county paper stood in the crowd with a notebook. Someone was live streaming. Walt drove his truck up Main Street with Bryce in the passenger seat. She hadn't spoken since they left the house. She wore the leather jacket Helen had bought her the day before, plain black, no patches yet, and her hands were folded tight in her lap. "You don't have to get out," Walt said. "You can stay in the truck." "No." She opened the door. "I'm done hiding." She stepped out, and the crowd shifted. 1,000 riders turned to look at the girl they'd come for. The girl most of them had never met. The girl who'd bled for a stranger in a parking lot and been thrown in a cell for it. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. They just nodded. One by one, 1,000 nods from 1,000 strangers. It was the quietest, loudest thing Bryce had ever felt. Reed climbed onto the flatbed. He wore no suit, no tie, just jeans, boots, and his Iron Wolves vest with President stitched across the chest. He tapped the microphone once. "My name is Reed Garrison. I'm the president of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. We are 1,200 members across 3 states. We are veterans, mechanics, teachers, engineers, nurses, and fathers. We are not a gang. We are a family." He paused. The street was silent. 2 weeks ago, a 19-year-old girl, homeless, alone, with nothing to her name, watched 5 men beat a 63-year-old man in a parking lot. She didn't walk away. She didn't call for help. She stepped in. She fought. She bled. And she saved his life. Reed pointed to the screen behind him. This is what happened that night. Hank pressed play. The footage rolled on the big screen. Crisp, clear, undeniable. Craig Dutton throwing the first punch. Walt hitting the asphalt. 5 men kicking him on the ground. Then Bryce, small, fast, fearless, running into the frame and fighting back. The crowd watched in silence. Some covered their mouths. Some turned away. The teenagers stopped filming and just stared. When the footage ended, Reed didn't give the crowd time to breathe. He played the second clip, Craig's voice on speakerphone, shaky, panicked. "Aunt Donna, we got a problem." And Donna's voice, clear, controlled, unmistakable. "Calm down, I'll handle it. Just keep your mouth shut." The screen went dark. Every head on Main Street turned toward Donna's diner. Donna Prescott stood behind the glass door of her restaurant. She hadn't come outside. She'd watched the riders arrive from behind the counter, arms crossed, jaw set, convinced she could wait them out. She'd survived worse than a bunch of bikers with a grudge. But now the footage was playing. Now her voice was echoing down Main Street. Now 1,000 people, riders, townspeople, reporters, were looking at her through the glass like she was the one in a cell. She pushed open the door and stepped out. "This is ridiculous. That footage could be doctored. That girl is a criminal, and you people are..." "Donna." Sheriff Barnes stepped out of the crowd. He'd been standing near the flatbed the whole time, hat in hand. "I've had the footage authenticated by the State Crime Lab. It's real, every frame." Donna's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Craig Dutton, Tyler Voss, and Derek Earle were arrested this morning. Barnes continued. "Aggravated assault, filing a false police report, and conspiracy. Officer Tate has been suspended pending an internal review for failure to conduct a proper investigation." He looked at Donna directly. "And you, ma'am, are under investigation for destruction of evidence, conspiracy to file false charges, and obstruction of justice. I'd advise you to get a lawyer. A real one." The color drained from Donna's face. She stepped backward into the diner. The door swung shut behind her. Through the glass, the crowd watched her sit down at her own counter and put her head in her hands. Nobody felt sorry for her. Reed turned back to the crowd. His voice dropped lower. This girl had nothing. No home, no family, no one who'd vouch for her. And when the world told her it wasn't her fight, she fought anyway. When the system tried to bury her, she didn't break. He looked at Bryce. And now she has 1,000 brothers and sisters who will make sure nobody buries her again. The first clap came from somewhere in the middle of the crowd. Then another. Then 100. Then 1,000. Not a polite round of applause, a wall of sound that bounced off the storefronts and rolled down Main Street like thunder. Bryce stood in the middle of it. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She just stood there, absorbing it, letting it hit her like something physical. Her chin trembled once. She pressed her lips together and held. Walt walked over to her. He unfolded a leather vest and held it open. On the back, a freshly stitched patch. Iron Wolves. Prospect. He slipped it over her shoulders. It fit. Reed leaned into the microphone one last time. His voice was quiet now, but every word carried. Courage doesn't need a home, it just needs a heart. 1,000 engines roared to life. The ground shook, the windows rattled, and Bryce Fletcher, homeless, nameless, invisible for 19 years, stood in the center of 1,000 riders who had come to say one thing. You are not alone anymore, Owen. 3 months later, the courthouse in Des Moines processed the adoption papers. Walt and Helen Caldwell, legal guardians of Bryce Fletcher Caldwell. The judge stamped it without ceremony. Helen cried anyway. Bryce held the document in both hands and read her new name twice. She didn't change Fletcher, she added to it. You don't erase where you came from. You build on top of it. The training started the week after. Walt ran it himself. 5 days a week in the garage he'd converted into a gym. Boxing fundamentals first. Footwork, guard, combinations. Bryce already had speed and instinct. What she lacked was structure. You fight like a street cat, Walt told her after the first session. Fast and mean. But a street cat can't lead a pack. We need to make you a wolf. He brought in help. Hank Morrison taught her Krav Maga, close quarters defense, disarming techniques, how to neutralize a threat without throwing a single punch. A retired Marine named Cole Bennett ran her through tactical movement, how to read a room, position a team, control an exit. Reed Garrison sat her down every Sunday afternoon and taught her something harder than any of it. Leadership. How to listen before you speak. How to carry weight without showing strain. How to make a decision that affects 1,000 people and stand behind it when it costs you. Bryce absorbed everything the way she always had. Fast, quiet, complete. The girl who'd learned to fight by scrapping over dumpster scraps now trained with purpose. Every bruise had a lesson. Every drill had a reason. 6 months after the adoption, Walt called a gathering. Every chapter, every officer. 1,200 members filled a rented fairground outside Des Moines. Walt stood on a stage with Bryce beside him. "I built this club on one principle," he said. "You protect the people who can't protect themselves." This girl lived that before she ever wore our patch. He turned to Reed, who stepped forward holding a new vest. The back patch read, "Vice President." Reed placed it on Bryce's shoulders the same way Walt had placed the first one. Like armor, like a promise. 1,200 riders stood and applauded. Under Bryce's leadership, the Iron Wolves shifted. They still rode. They still gathered. But now they patrolled neighborhoods where women walked home alone at night. They ran free self-defense classes for children and single mothers in church basements and community centers across 3 states. Bryce taught the beginner classes herself, showing 14-year-old girls how to break a wrist grip, how to strike and run, how to scream in a way that demanded attention. She taught them what no one had taught her. You don't have to survive alone. 1 year later, on a Saturday morning, Bryce Fletcher Caldwell rode down Main Street, Cedar Falls, at the head of a column. Behind her, 1,000 motorcycles. The exhaust shook the air. The chrome burned in the sun. She passed the gas go where she'd once counted coins for water. She passed the overpass where she'd hidden her sleeping bag behind a concrete pillar. She passed the parking lot where she'd chosen to stay instead of run. She passed Donna's Diner, windows dark, sign gone. A for-lease notice hung crooked on the door. She didn't slow down. She didn't look. Ahead, the road opened wide. Behind her, 1,000 engines hummed in formation. Steady, loyal, unbreakable. The sound of family. Bryce Fletcher spent 19 years with no one. Now she had everyone, and every Saturday, somewhere in the Midwest, a girl who once had nothing teaches another girl who has nothing how to stand up, fight back, and never wait for someone else to save her. What would you have done that night in the parking lot? Drop it in the comments. If this story hit you, share it. Someone needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this.
The story is over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We usually believe family is something you are born into, the people whose blood you share, the house you grew up in. If you got lucky, family was a foundation. If you didn't, family was a wound. But the story showed me something different. Family isn't blood, isn't a house, isn't even people who have known you a long time. Family is whoever shows up when you have nothing to offer them in return. That's the part I can't shake. The people who raised her didn't show up. The system didn't show up. The town didn't show up. But a stranger she far from in a parking lot, he showed up and brought 1,000 more with him. People who had never met her, people who owned her nothing. They showed up because somebody said she is one of ours now, and that's good enough. Here's the part that hurts. Most of us have someone in our life right now who's quietly droning, a co-worker, a cousin, a kid in the family. They are not asking for help because they have learned not to. They have learned that asking gets you ignored, so they go quiet. They disappear in plain sight, and you let them because they didn't ask loud enough. The lesson isn't help people when they ask. It's not take the ones who stops asking. Yours are the ones who need it most. So this week, find the person who stops asking, showed up before they had to fight for it. If you had been in that parking lot, would you have stepped in? I recommend hit like, subscribe. See you next time.